Just in, new details on a major midair scare over the weekend. An off-duty pilot tried to cut the power on an Alaska airline flight by pulling the emergency fire extinguisher handles while the plane was at cruising altitude. This is coming from a memo that CNN obtained sent to Alaska Air pilots. Now, 44-year-old Joseph Emerson is charged with 83 counts of attempted murder, among other offenses. An air traffic control audio recording captured part of the incident, which took place Sunday on a flight from the Seattle area to San Francisco. The flight was diverted to Portland, where it landed safely.
We've got the guy that tried to shut the engines down out of the cockpit, and he doesn't sound like he's causing any issue in the back right now. I think he's subdued. Other than that, yeah, we want law enforcement as soon as we get on the ground and park.
CNN safety analyst David Susi is here with us. He is a former FAA safety inspector. David, first off, just explain this pulling of the fire extinguisher handles, what this would do in a situation like this.
Well, it depends on which ones he pulls, of course, but if he's shutting down the engines on the fire extinguishers in the engines, it can cause the engines to actually shut down as well, because you're telling it that there's a fire on board, so you're going to pull those extinguishers. If that's in fact what he did, you can notice that the pilots also say he's trying to shut down the engines, so that might have not have been the only thing he did.
And there's no recovering if you have the extinguisher pulled? I mean, the plane basically becomes like a glider?
Well, if you pull both, yes. Typically, you would only pull one or the other, but this guy sounds like he was trying to shut down whatever he could. So at that point, there would not be a lot of recovery at that point, other than the glide of the aircraft, which they do glide. They still do glide if you have a good landing area ahead of you. But typically in that situation, at that altitude, you may not have a lot of options.
Now, the pilot on that recording sounds amazingly calm, but I cannot imagine this was a calm moment that was playing out in the cockpit.
Not in the least, Brianna. If you look at the flight record, you can see that over a period of about 2 minutes, maybe 3, it went from 450 knots down to about 370. The altitude went from 31,000 feet down to about 27,000 feet. So there was 5,000 or 6,000 feet of altitude that were dropped really quickly. And so it was a very dramatic thing. They must have had a lot of trouble in that cockpit. It's not easy to subdue someone in that jump seat area. I've ridden thousands of times in that jump seat, and their pilots are very vulnerable to whoever's in that seat.
So you're talking about a struggle, like a pretty serious struggle that would have occurred.
Absolutely. To try to turn back, have one of the pilots, someone has to keep flying the airplane, obviously. Someone has to maintain what's going on, and someone has to turn around, and it is behind you. It's way behind you. The jump seat is back there, and the jump seat person has access to the center console with the throttles, with the fire extinguishers, with basically everything to do with power is right there in front of the jump seater. So that's why they always take so many precautions for who gets to ride in that seat.
But it's not unusual. I mean, right? Normally frequently you have a pilot who's off duty, who needs to get back to wherever he or she is riding in this seat. Does anything about this indicate to you that this particular pilot maybe plotted this and thought this through?
I would think that he would. I mean, it doesn't sound like a instantaneous thing that says, gee, I think I'm going to do this. It sounds to me like he plotted to be there where he was and pull those engines, particularly when he did, which was not a really vulnerable part of the flight. It's not like he did it during takeoff or during landing, which would have certainly resulted in fatalities. But at the altitude that he was at, there's less chance that there would be fatalities, but it's still, to me, it sounds like something that he thought about and decided to do. It's not something that just was spontaneously had a mental lapse or something.
You mentioned this loss in altitude and what was shown. Presumably the passengers are aware of this. I mean, what do you think they were experiencing?
Yeah, there was no question something was going wrong, very wrong, at the time that this was going on, just by the fact that you can see how quickly the aircraft dropped, the turns that it made, and unscheduled and unplanned turns that were made. So there was something going on in the cockpit, and I think the passengers probably knew something was going on, but they didn't know what. Very uncertain time for them.
Yeah, thank goodness this ended well.
Yes.
David Susi, thank you.
I can't believe how calm they were.
Unbelievable,
well,
I agree. David Susi, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And this